we discussed the adaptation of each vascular tissue to its function. After that, we discussed the transportation of water and mineral salts across the roots. Apart from that, we also identified and described 3 pathways of water conduction and mineral salts. That means apoplast, symplast, and the vacuolar pathway. We also discussed upward movement of water. Under this part, we also revised forces governing upward movement of water. That means root pressure, capillarity, and the transpiration pool. We also discussed, let me rub point number 1 and 2 in order to get the space there. We also discussed transpiration. In transpiration here, we started by defining the term. After defining the term, we also discussed the areas or places where transpiration takes place. After that, we also discussed the advantages and disadvantages of transpiration. We also covered transportation of food. Transportation of manufactured food in plants. It is my hope that you passed through all these things for yourselves and you prepared good notes for your revision. Therefore, today I'm moving from this subtopic to a new subtopic. The new subtopic which I'm talking about is this one, transportation in vertebrates. My today's presentation will be based on about 3 questions. I will pose a question there, then we will discuss. After completing one question, I will pose another question. I will continue doing so until I finish all the questions which have been prepared by me. Let us start with the first question. Question 1 is this one. It says that describe the structure of the heart. Describe the structure of the heart. Okay, let me ask you a question. What is the heart, by the way? What is the heart? Think it for about 20 seconds. What is the heart? Do you have a heart? Okay, you may realize that The heart is the pumping organ. Pumping organ in animals like vertebrates. It pumps blood to different parts of the body. And after knowing what the heart is, ask yourself where the heart is located in your body. Where does it located? Where? You may observe that the heart is located between the lungs. It is located between the lungs. Let's say this is the lung and this one is the lung. So in between there, we expect the organ which is known as the heart. Apart from that, it is also found. It is found beyond the sternum. So in this position, we expect to see the heart. After knowing its position, it is good now to go to our question there. We are required to describe it. For instance, you may say that the heart is surrounded by the sac. It is surrounded by the sac. That sac is known as pericardium. This sac is filled with a fluid. The fluid is known as pericardial fluid. Do you know the function of that fluid? Think it. What is the function of pericardial fluid which is there? Mind you that the function of this fluid is to prevent friction. Friction between the heart, the wall of the heart, and the other tissues. That is why the pericardium is filled with the fluid. Apart from having the fluid, the pericardium contains the outer layer. The outer layer is formed by inelastic white fibers, and this is found outside. Inside there are two membranes. The outer membrane, which is connected to the white fibers here, and the inner membrane, which is connected to the wall of the heart. Apart from that, there is also the heart is composed of muscles. The type of muscles which are found there are known as cardiac cardiac muscles. There is also blood vessels which supply the cardiac muscle nutrients and the oxygen. There is also connective tissues. Connective tissues. And let us now go directly to the heart itself. I think you remember the structure of the heart. Okay, it simply looks like the rough diagram which has been drawn there. This is the wall of heart. And when you check the walls of the ventricles or the lower chambers and the walls of the upper chambers have thin walls compared to the lower chambers. Do you know why? Why these two chambers have thin walls compared to lower chambers? You may realize that these upper chambers required to pump blood from here to here. The distance there is short. Therefore, much pressure is not required. That is why the walls are thin. But for the case of the lower chambers, the walls are thick because they are required to pump blood to very far. For example, to different parts of the body. It requires high pressure. In order to withstand that pressure, the walls here should be thicker. Apart from having these walls, the heart is divided into 4 chambers. The 2 upper chambers, these 2, and the lower upper chambers. The 2 upper chambers are known as atria. Atria plural, singular atrium. And the lower chambers are called ventricles. They are also 2. It means right ventricles and left ventricles. And here there is a valve which separates the upper chamber in the left hand side and the lower chamber, that is left ventricle. This valve is known as bicuspid. When it closes, it prevents entry of blood from upper chamber to the lower chamber. And when it opens, it allows entry of blood from the upper chamber to the lower chamber. And in this side, in the right hand side, there is also this valve. The valve here is known as tricuspid. Tricuspid. It also prevents flowing of blood from the upper chamber to this lower chamber when it closes. But when it opens, it allows the entry of blood from right atrium to right ventricle. Then the heart is separated by this membrane. This membrane is known as septum. It is known as septum. Apart from septum, there is also these blood vessels. That is aorta and pulmonary artery. For the case of aorta, here there is also the valve. And in pulmonary artery, also here, there is a valve. These two valves are known as semiluna. Semiluna valves. Semiluna valves, when it opens, allows blood to flow from ventricles to different parts of the body, for the case of left part, and flowing of blood from ventricle to the lungs for the case of right ventricle. So structurally, the heart looks like that diagram and has those parts which I have already mentioned there. But as usual, in order to understand more, you are required to go in details. Use your books which you have, check the structure of the heart, try to describe each part which is found there. Okay, after that, let us go to another question. We are now going to question number 2. Describe the structure of cardiac muscles. Describe the structure of cardiac muscles. Before describing here, you are required to know what are cardiac muscles. What are cardiac muscles? Here, I'm going to give you the definition of muscles in general. Muscles are soft tissues. Muscles are soft tissues which are found in most animals. There are 3 types of muscles. First one is known as skeletal muscles. Another one is cardiac muscles. And the last one is smooth muscles. Skeletal muscles are under conscious will. It means you may decide whether to allow your muscles to move or not. For example, these muscles of your arm, these are skeletal muscles. You can decide to stretch your arm or to bend your arm. The muscles which are found in the legs also are skeletal muscles. You may decide whether to go forward or backward. It means those muscles are under the conscious will. They are controlled by conscious will. And we also call them voluntary muscles. You decide voluntarily to allow contraction and relaxation of those muscles. But for the case of cardiac muscles are they are not under conscious will. we consider them to be involuntary muscles. For example, the muscles which are found in your heart, the wall of the heart, you cannot decide to allow those muscles to contract or not. That is why we say that they are under involuntary. And smooth muscles like cardiac muscles, they are not controlled by conscious will. We also call them involuntary muscles. For instance, you may check the muscles which are found in your digestive tract or in your respiratory system. Soon after food entering the esophagus here, the movement is not controlled by you. It is controlled by unconscious will, that is involuntary activity. Okay, after knowing these three types of muscles, mind you that here I'm interested with the cardiac muscles. Other muscles you will learn in respective topics. Let us go direct to cardiac muscles. Therefore, cardiac muscles are found only on the walls of the heart. They are found on the walls of the heart only. And we can describe cardiac muscles as follows. First of all, they have been made up of muscle cells made up of muscle cells. These muscle cells are also known as muscle fibers. Each muscle cell contains either one or two nuclei. They have a lot of mitochondria. And one muscle fiber is separated by another muscle fiber with a dark band. The dark band is known as intercalated disc. Intercalated disc. The membrane is modified to allow diffusion of ions. Membrane modified to allow diffusion of ions. Therefore, excitation will take place there in order to initiate the so-called nerve impulse, which will allow transmission of message. Apart from intercalated disc, there is also, each muscle fiber is composed of myofibrils. Myofibrils, and these myofibrils cross to each other and forming the so-called striations. For example, consider the following rough diagram which I'm going to draw here. Okay, roughly it looks like this diagram. This is the nucleus. There is also dark band. The dark band here is what is called intercalated disc. There is also striations. I said that these are formed by myofibrils. So myofibrils are there, and from this band to here, it forms the so-called muscle cell or muscle fiber. Therefore, structurally, muscle fiber looks like that diagram. For more understanding, it is better to use Understanding Biology or Biological Science or Form 6 book, which has been written by Tai. Those books contain very nice diagrams of cardiac muscle. Have you understood there? Okay. Let us go to the last question. That is question number 3. Question 3 says that how cardiac muscles adapted to their functions. Here, you are required to relate now. You relate the structure of cardiac muscles and the functions which they perform. Think about it. What are the adaptations of cardiac muscles? We have already discussed the structure. We described the structure of cardiac muscles. Now relate with the functions. It does not fatigue easily because they contract and relax slowly compared to other muscles. Contraction and relaxation takes place slowly. This enables these muscles to prevent their cells from being fatigued. That is adaptation number 1. Adaptation 2. If you remember, we said that cardiac muscles contain a lot of mitochondria. Why? For energy provision, to allow contraction and the relaxation of that muscle. That is why they have a lot of mitochondria. Apart from having mitochondria, the walls also modified in such a way that to allow easily diffusion of ions. The membrane have been modified to allow easily diffusion of ions, which facilitate easily excitation. It is easy for a wave of excitation to be created there and enables the muscle to work as a unit. For instance, let's say you have this muscle cell which is attached by second muscle cell and the third muscle cell. Therefore, when the ions diffuse here, it means a wave of excitation will be created easily, which will cause this cell also to be excited. The same applies to this one. In so doing, the whole muscle will work as a unit. But apart from that, you can also find out other adaptations based on cardiac muscles. You may consider the refractory period. Refractory period. In these muscles, they have longer refractory period. I think you know what is refractory period because you have already learned in coordination in Form 5. Refractory period here is longer. Why? For the same reason. To prevent muscle fatigue. It allows time for exchanging of ions and preventing the muscle from being fatigued. That is why the period there is very large. But these are some adaptations of cardiac muscles. There are so many other adaptations. You are required to sit down again and find out those adaptations apart from the ones which have been presented by me. Okay, after reaching here, we are through with the questions which I have prepared. But is it enough to discuss only what is cardiac muscles, description of cardiac muscles, and adaptations of cardiac muscles? To me, I think that it is not enough. We are required to know the so-called cardiac cycles. Cardiac cycle. What does it mean? Is it your first time to come across with that term? Obviously, no. Therefore, cardiac cycles are the sequential events which take place in one contraction and relaxation of the heart. When the heart contracts and relax, then those events, sequential events which take place there, are the ones which are considered to be cardiac cycles. Mind you that those events take place in the heart. Therefore, these cycles have been divided into 4. The first one is known as Atrial Diastole. Another one is Atrial Systole. The third is Ventricular Systole. And the last one is Ventricular Diastole. Before checking the events which occur under each part, it is better for you to know the meaning of diastole and the systole. What is diastole? What is diastole? Think it for about 2 seconds. Okay, you may realize that diastole is when the heart relaxes. When the heart relaxes, we call it diastole. And when the heart contracts, we call it systole. Let me write here. You may follow these arrows which I have indicated here. diastole, heart relaxation. Systole, heart contraction. After knowing the meaning of diastole and systole, you are now required to know the events taking place in each of these four phases. Start with the number one here, atrial diastole. What takes place during atrial diastole? Think for about 2 seconds. Okay, mind you that during atrial diastole, we expect the atria to be relaxed at that time. The atria relaxed. Then, when they have been relaxed, it allows the blood to enter. For the case of left atrium, we expect it to receive blood from pulmonary vein, the blood coming from the lungs, which is oxygenated, will enter to the left atrium. I'm talking about the upper chambers. Apart from that, at the same times, while blood enters to the left atrium, blood also enters to the right atrium. Blood which enters here comes from different parts of the body. It enters through the blood vessel which is known as vena cava. The entry of blood to the atria will continue and make the pressure in atrium to be higher than the pressure in the ventricles. When that point is reached, we expect that pressure to push the valves there, atrioventricular valves, which I have already discussed with you. That is, bicuspid valve and the tricuspid valve will be pushed downwards. This will allow blood to flow now from atrium to ventricle. Mind you that in order for blood to flow, it means the atria should contract. Therefore, when they contract, it means you move now from atrial diastole, we go to atrial systole. They contract and forcing blood to enter the ventricles. The blood will continue to enter the ventricles. Then the pressure will be created there, which will push the atrioventricular valves to close. The valves there close in order to prevent backflow of blood. Blood cannot return back. So they remain in the ventricle. At that time, the ventricle should also contract to allow now blood to be squeezed out of ventricles. Blood from left ventricle will enter to the blood vessel which is known as aorta. But mind you that I introduced you the valve there, Semiluna Valves. The pressure which is created by blood will make the Semiluna valve there to open and allowing blood to flow from left ventricle to aorta. Then when it goes there, the pressure also will push the valve backward and causing the Semiluna valve to close. When the Semiluna valve there close, it prevents backflow of blood. and blood from there will be transported to different parts of the body. Then, when the blood have already been squeezed from the ventricle, it means now the ventricle enter to this period. It relaxes. But mind you that I'm talking both ventricles. Both ventricles will relax. The relaxation of these ventricles will allow now to receive blood. Blood will enter to ventricles again, and the cycle continues. The relaxation of ventricles is what is called the ventricular diastole. It is my hope that you have understood about the cardiac cycles. You are required to exhaust a lot of material from your books. Use biological science. It has been written precisely concerning with the cardiac cycles. Okay. Up to here, let me conclude my lesson by saying that today we have discussed several aspects based in this subtopic of transportation in vertebrates. We started with the structure of the heart. We mentioned how the heart looks like and which parts form the so-called heart. We also discussed the structure of cardiac muscles. We started by defining the term muscle. We also classified types of muscles. We said that there are 3 types. We mentioned those 3 types as skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. After that, we described the adaptations of cardiac muscles. But before the adaptations, we described the structure of cardiac muscles. It is my hope that you have get several concepts from my presentation here. Up to here, I have reached to the end of my presentation. Therefore, I welcome you in another presentation. Another presentation will still be on the same subtopic, but the continuation of it. Thank you so much. That is the end of today's presentation. We shall meet in another presentation. Thank you.
Kipindi cha Darasa Online kimeletwa kwenu na Chuo Kikuu cha Sauti Mbeya. Rais wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania Dr. John Magufuli amezungumza kwa njia ya simu na rais mteule wa Jamhuri ya Burundi Evariste Ndayishimiye na kumpongeza kwa uamuzi wa Mahakama ya Katiba nchini Burundi iliyoagiza rais mteule aapishwe haraka. Katika mazungumzo hayo, Rais Dr. Magufuli amemtakia heri rais mteule Ndayishimiye kuelekea kuapishwa kwake kuwa rais wa Jamhuri ya Burundi, kazi ambayo itafanyika hivi karibuni. Rais Dr. Magufuli amemhakikishia rais mteule Ndayishimiye kwamba Tanzania itaendeleza na kukuza zaidi uhusiano na ushirikiano wake wa karibu na Burundi kwa kuwa nchi hizo ni majirani, marafiki na ndugu wa kihistoria. Rais Dr. Magufuli amerudia kumpa pole kwa msiba